Hi there, I'm Jeannie Walters, founder of Experience Investigators, where our mission is to create fewer ruined days for customers through training and workshops, coaching and consulting, and keynote speaking. In this video, I will be walking through our Customer Experience Success Statement Workbook. Now, if you haven't already downloaded this resource, you can do so for free at bit.ly/CX Success Workbook. That's bit.ly/CX-Success-Workbook. All right, let's get started. So, why are we talking about a CX success statement to begin with? Well, I have found in my organization and in others that if we don't define what success looks like, it's really easy for other people to think, what is this customer experience thing? Why are we investing in this? Why are we dedicating resources to it? It's not enough to say we're going to deliver great experiences. We need to go one step beyond that and really define what does this mean for our organization, our leaders, and our customers. So in this workbook, what I offer is helping you walk through all the key questions to ask to really get this done right. So let's talk about defining what CX success is and why you need a statement to do so. We're going to do this by looking at the big picture goals of your organization. We also will be considering both the organizational goals and individual leadership goals. We're going to be talking about specific outcomes and metrics. And finally, we need to do a little bit of a reality check at the end. That's what this workbook walks through, and that's what I hope to help you with today. So as we go through this, remember that this is a great thing to do with your teams. Invite other people into this process, and you'll get that buy-in early as you develop your definition of success. Now, the first step here is to identify your top 5 organizational goals. Now, these are not necessarily customer experience specific. In fact, they're usually not. In this example, what I talk about is that these are the goals that a large enterprise company might have about gaining more market share. Or if you're a startup, maybe your goals are all about acquisition. These are the goals that everybody in your organization is aware of and understands that they have a big part of. This is what will define success for everybody in the organization, not just for customer experience. So I always recommend, if you can, identify the top 5 in your organization. And I say this simply because sometimes there are so many. We might have a divisional goal. We might have a regional goal. We might have a business unit goal, and then that falls under the corporate goal. Those might have 5 each. It's hard sometimes to identify what's most important, but I encourage you to keep this limited to 5 because that's where you'll get that navigation that you need in order to get the statement down. The next step in this process is to identify the top goal for each leader in your organization. Now, this is where I get some pushback sometimes when I'm working with clients because they say things like, well, how am I supposed to know what their goals are? But if you look around at your executive level, at that C-suite level, what's important to the chief financial officer? Well, they're probably looking to cut costs in the organization. What's important to your chief marketing officer? Maybe they've been really focused on the reach of your organization and your brand. We need to really think about what's going on in their heads. How can we serve our leaders across the organization and not just narrowly focus on our own goals? The reason is because customer experience needs everybody's involvement. You need that cross-functional support. And so the best way to develop your own goals where you'll be able to achieve that is by really considering what the other leaders in your organization truly care about. And in this workbook, we provide this grid where you can just start writing down who's the leader and what is their top goal. It really helps us get into that mindset, just like we do in customer experience when we're always trying to walk in the shoes of our customer. In some cases, you can think of other leaders here as your customers. Now, the third step in the workbook is to determine your organization's top customer experience specific outcomes. Say that 3 times fast. So when we are looking at this, we want to think about, okay, what are those organizational goals that we just identified? What are those leadership goals that we just identified? And when we put them together, what are the real outcomes that we're looking for? So in the example in the workbook, I talk about this idea that your organizational goal might be about a 10% lift in market share. That's a very reasonable goal. That's something we see a lot. And maybe your leadership goal is something about what your CEO is saying a lot. Don't be afraid to listen and not just go off the poster on the wall. Listen to your leaders. What's really important to them? So if your CEO is often heard saying, you know what, we get our best customers from referrals. Let's get more referrals. Then you can put that together with that market share organizational goal and start talking about the outcomes that you need to drive. So in this case, you know that you have a need for referrals. Now, in order to drive referrals, you need to increase customer happiness. Well, that's a good goal. You can start talking about how if we deliver a better customer experience, that means we will improve and increase the number of referrals that we get. And then that will lead to that organizational goal of increased market share. So when you look at these things, I encourage you to really think about that at each step, each level. What are we really trying to achieve? Because by putting this all together, you'll not only support your customer experience goals, you'll support the goals of your entire organization. And that's what this is really about. This is how we're defining success. So once you do that, and keep in mind that not every single one of those organizational goals and the leadership goals will have that CX specific outcome. That's okay, but you need a handful. You need to make sure that you're at least addressing some of the bigger organizational goals and those leadership goals, especially for those leaders where you need that cross-functional support. This is where you can write that in the workbook, so you can really start identifying those CX specific outcomes. And then, of course, we need to track success. We need to measure success as we go. So what are the best metrics to measure? I've seen in a lot of organizations, CX metrics are used just because that's always what's been done, but they're not really tied to these outcomes or these definitions of success. So while you might report things like, well, NPS is going up, maybe not everybody in the organization really understands what that means. What we're trying to do here is create a success statement that everybody can get behind and understand that by tracking certain metrics, we are aligning those with the specific outcomes that we've already identified here. So in the example that I used with referrals, referral rate seems like a really good thing to measure. It could be that simple, but often those things are not measured. We just make assumptions about them. This is where you really want to dig into what are we measuring today? What can we measure tomorrow? And what lines up the best with these outcomes and this definition of success that we're building? So look for what are the metrics that we need and then outline them here in your workbook. And then you can start making decisions based on, okay, we don't have that capability, or we do, or we need to build a plan to actually get that capability. That comes next as well. This is a chance to write it all down, get it out of your head, and think about what are the best metrics so that we can support our goals. And then finally, we want to put this all together. Now, we call this a CX success statement because essentially that's what it is. It's really easy to kind of go overboard with these things and have 17 paragraphs that each have 18 bullet points. But at the end of the year, when you look at that, you might think, we did about 1/10 of that. My goal with this workbook and by helping you is to really define this in a way that is succinct enough for everybody to understand, but also is concrete enough to give you direction, to make sure that you understand what does success look like and how can we achieve it with our customer experience. So we offer this format here in the workbook. This is a template of sorts, and I encourage you to use it, but I also encourage you to make this your own. Every culture has their own way of communicating. Everybody has their kind of own way of putting things down, either in very formal corporate speak or maybe more casual. The tone and the themes and things like that, really embrace the culture you're in when you're developing this so that other people really recognize it as part of your organization. So in this case, we offer this format where it's literally filling in the blanks. Our organization will be dedicated to achieving these customer experience outcomes. Now, I'm going to underline something here that I see a lot when I'm working on this with coaching clients. They come back and they still haven't been specific enough. Make sure that it's specific. Make sure it's not something that if I said, what does that mean? Or what does success look like with that goal? That you can answer that very definitively. So that's one little asterisk of warning here. Make sure you're being specific. These outcomes serve our broader organizational goals, including and list what your customer experience outcomes will support. They also serve the goals of our leadership, including, and go ahead and list those out. Maybe you've discovered that there's a way to reduce costs by providing better customer service. That's a great thing to list for your CFO and say, we know that we're going to reduce expenses, which will make our CFO happy. And then we will measure success in the following ways and make sure that you actually have those metrics listed out and that you understand how you will measure success so that along the way, you can start adjusting. You can start seeing, are we successful? Are we gaining that traction we need or not? And make adjustments as you go. And then finally, this is where you need to do a little reality check. Ask yourself, are our goals realistic and attainable? Think about the limitations, the restrictions, the resources that you have. We have to work in reality. It's really easy to want to wave a magic wand here, but I really encourage you to look back on what you've just written in this workbook and consider, is this actually attainable? And if not, what do we need to adjust? Sometimes it's a timeline. Sometimes instead of saying, we're going to do this within a year, maybe you look at it and say, this is more of a 5-year plan. That's great. Go ahead and put that in. Maybe you look at it and think, oh gosh, we can't do 3 of the things that I want. We can only do 1. That's okay too. But make this realistic and attainable so that you can feel that you've achieved it once you do. That once we've defined success, it's something that you can actually achieve with your organization. So at the end of this workbook, you can put this all together. We have it all mapped out for you. You can write this out and create your own CX success statement. And I know you can do this. I know it can feel a little daunting, but I encourage you to work with your team on this cross-functionally, work with other leaders in your organization as well. And you know what? I'm here for you. The team at Experience Investigators is here for you too. So don't be afraid to reach out if you want to schedule a workshop or a live session to walk through this with you. You can do that at experienceinvestigators.com/live, L-I-V-E. And that way we can work through this together. We can help you define what success looks like so that you can create a plan and a strategy to actually achieve it. And there's nothing greater than feeling like you really pushed your organization forward in a way that served your customers in an amazing way, as well as served your organization and your leadership in an amazing way as well. Thanks for watching. For more help setting CX goals, click on the thumbnail for our video on SMART goals, along with our free SMART goals checklist, or subscribe for more weekly videos like this.